Without objection.
And I have that for the desk. I also ask unanimous consent that the Amendment 4231 be modified with changes at the desk.
Is there objection? Hearing no objection. Whoop. Sorry.
They brought down the broke chart. Look in the back. Yeah. Mr. President.
The Senator from Oklahoma.
I want to tell you that I concur what I just heard.
The Senator's request has not yet been agreed to.
The modification has not?
I guess that's correct.
Is there is an objection?
The clerk has found the modification. And since there is no objection, the amendment is so modified.
Thank you.
Sure.
I wanted to say, Mr. President, that I enjoyed very much Senator Kaufman's words, and I really agreed with him. I think what he talked about of what we're doing for our military in this bill is appropriate. It's something that has to be done. The only difference that I would have with him is it's not an emergency. We all know it's not an emergency. The reason it's being classified as an emergency is because we don't want to make the hard choices of getting rid of something else to pay for it. And we don't want to have another violation of PAYGO, so what we do is we classify it as an emergency. Now, the only thing in this bill that's an emergency is the FEMA money. That's the only thing that really meets the definition of our own rules for an emergency. Unforeseen, unpredictable, and unanticipated. Everything else in this bill is predictable, foreseen, and anticipated. So we are actually violating our own integrity when we bring a bill to the floor and call it an emergency when everybody knows it's not. And why are we doing that? We're doing that because we don't want to have to live with the rule we just set for ourselves called PAYGO. Now, I didn't vote for PAYGO. I don't believe in PAYGO because PAYGO is exactly what I said it would be when we had the vote. As an American taxpayer, you go pay, and we'll go spend. And we won't diminish any of our spending, our profligate spending, because of this rule. And so since we have passed the bill on PAYGO, February 12th of 2010, that's when it was signed into law, we've borrowed $46 billion and waived PAYGO, borrowed $10 billion and waived PAYGO, borrowed $99 billion and waived PAYGO. That's all in March. Borrowed $18 billion. This one isn't going to count against PAYGO because we put a false emergency. And we have another $190 billion coming to us from the House for extenders. And we're going to waive PAYGO on that. So we will have spent $530 billion since February 12th that we don't have, and we refuse to make choices about lower priority programs and eliminating them. That's the truth. Nobody's going to dispute. You can't even get anybody to debate you on these things. They won't debate you because they know it's the fact. They won't stand up and even counter it because they know it's the fact. Well, what are the other facts? Here's the other fact. FEMA's broke. Medicare's broke. Medicaid's broke. Fannie and Freddie are broke. Social Security's broke. It's running negative balance. The U.S. Post Office is broke. The Highway Trust Fund is broke. And guess what? So is the federal government. And if we're not careful, we're going to add our kids down here and we're going to say they're broke. That's where we're headed. Broke. That means our liabilities are greater than our assets. That means the money we have is not sufficient to cover the debts that we have. We've seen this tremendous volatility in the markets over the last 2 weeks, and they're really upset because they're not sure there's a stable euro right now. The euro's dropped from $1.43 in the last 4 months to $1.22. That's a significant decline in that currency. Why is that? Because there's no confidence that they're going to be able to solve their problems that are broke. because they're not making the hard choices among priorities that are necessary for them to get out of the problems that they're faced. And we're just starting to see a backstop and IMF demands of Greece, and you're going to see it of many others, that they're going to have to make certain cuts in spending. Now, we have a couple of choices. We can wait 2 or 3 years when we're in the same shape to where the world currency and the world bankers are demanding of us that we make those hard choices, or we can start making them now where they're a lot less expensive and a lot less costly. I know that the amendments that we've offered have been sent to CBO, and what we've got, which tells us another entire problem that we have. You know, CBO saying they can't score a freeze in federal salaries. Well, we know it's going to go up $3.1 billion next year if we don't score it, but CBO won't score it. We know that regardless of the significant increase we had in our own budgets, 4.6%, I've averaged turning back more than $400,000 a year. Everybody in this Congress, everybody in this Senate could do that easily if they wanted to. We've offered $100 million in cuts to our own budgets. That's where we ought to start. If we're going to set an example, we ought to start with our own budget. CBO won't score that either. Why won't they score it? We're clueless to what the real world is about in terms of spending and budgets. We can't get a score, even though the direction in the amendment is to sell off $15 billion in unused properties and physical plant that we know we don't use, cost us $8 billion a year to maintain. CBO isn't going to score that either. So that's not going to be scored as savings. And rescinding unspent and uncommitted federal funds, of which there's over $350 billion sitting in the bank right now that are unobligated. I'm not talking about obligated. Unobligated, which just says we're going to manage our money better. We're going to make the stream. We're not going to let it sit there for so long. We're not going to borrow the money. We're going to borrow it more on a time-as-needed basis, and we're not going to have as much money sent in unobligated funds. So we're going to have criticism against our First Amendment because CBO doesn't score it. You know what? CBO's accuracy is about as good as mine at throwing a baseball. Not very good. I can't hit the strike zone, and neither do they. That doesn't mean anything against them because we're giving them lots of unknowns. But we've also set up a set of rules that is designed to not give us what we need to have, the real information. And no business, no family operates their budgets with such loose rules. Where are we going? Here's where we're going. Right now, there's discretionary spending in the United States since 1999. In 2010, and this is in real dollars, this is not inflation-adjusted dollars. It would not look quite as bad if it were in inflation-adjusted dollars. But we're going from $572 billion to $1,408 billion. And you know what? That doesn't count any of the spending, the $500 billion that we're going to pass outside of PAYGO. Doesn't count any of it. So in a time when our country owes $13 trillion, it's going to owe $26 trillion in 9 years, that's the path we're on, we're increasing spending and we're not paying for any of it. We're not making one hard choice. And one of the few things that are paid for in this bill continues to fund a commission we don't even need because we just passed the financial reform bill. And yet we're going to spend $1.8 million on the Financial Inquiry Commission. Why would we do that? I mean, you talk about throwing money down a rat hole. Why have the commission continue to meet? We've already decided in all our knowledge and all our wisdom that we knew how to fix it, even though we didn't even fix the underlying causes for the real collapse, Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. We didn't address it at all. We didn't address leverage ratios. So that's where we're going. $1.4 trillion this year, not counting everything that we're passing out of here that's not paid for. What does it mean? We heard Senator McCain talk about generational theft. Well, here's the face of it. Here's little Miss Madeline. When I first put this up here, less than 7 months ago, it was $38,000. It's now $42,000 per man, woman, and child in this country is what they owe individually on our net debt. That isn't our gross debt, that's our net debt. The $13 trillion doesn't represent our real debt. That only represents what we owe outside. It doesn't represent what we owe ourselves. So she's at $42,000. Extrapolate the increase from 38 to 42 every 6 months and see what you get. What you get 20 years from now, if you include unfunded liabilities, Madeline, when she's 24, will owe $1,113,000. That's what she's going to be responsible for. So when we hear somebody talk about generational theft, what they're talking about is robbing opportunity. Now, if you had a 6% interest rate on $1,113,000, it's not hard to figure out that that's $66,000 a year in interest that Madeline's going to have to pay before she pays any taxes to run the government, defend the country, pay for Medicare for me and the rest of the people in this room, before she owns a home, before she educates her kids. It's thievery. So how hard is it? How hard is it in a $3 trillion budget for us to find the money to pay for this war? How hard is it? It's only as hard as we make it. We're risk averse. We don't want to be criticized because some program who had somebody that was for it is not going to have that anymore. We're going to do it. We're going to eliminate those programs. I can promise you we are. The question is when we're going to do it and how drastic it's going to be and who's going to make us do it. And if we don't do it ourselves, then the priorities aren't going to be the priorities of the body. They're going to be the priorities of the world bankers. That's who's, we're going to do this. We're going to cut spending. The question is do we do it now and make it less painful, or do we wait until we're forced into it like the Greeks? I think our history, I think our culture, and I think our children are worth us starting to make those kind of difficult decisions. It's my hope that we will give consideration. I don't care what combination of cuts we make. I've just offered some. I'm willing for the appropriators to make the cuts. But we no longer live in a time when we can borrow from the future of our children to pay for now. It has to start. I would ask my colleagues to support that start. I yield the floor.
Mr. President.
Senator from Moore.